afternoon. It's good to see everyone here. I'm going to dive right in because this is a conversation that we could spend hours on. If you ever meet an executive director of a nonprofit and you don't know how to start the conversation, ask them how they're doing with their board. With that, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and because I'm nosy, I'd like them both to talk about their current affiliation, their name, obviously, a little bit about what their organization does, but also the pathway to wherever you're comfortable starting to where you are today and how you are sitting in these seats in particular. And Jhae, let me start with you.
My name is Jhae Thompson. I am the executive director of Hit the Books. We are an after-school youth program that serves students from 2nd to 8th grade, and we focus on academic enrichment, mentoring, and mixed martial arts. My pathway to becoming an executive director, I always say my plan B became my plan A. I actually started in corporate communications in Philadelphia, and a friend asked me if I wanted to make an extra $1,000 a month. I said yes, and then I said, what are we doing? Because no one offers you an extra $1,000 a month. And it happened to be working with young people. I ended up working at a therapeutic group home for adjudicated youth, and 18 years later, here I am.
Jhae, Danielle.
Hi, so I'm Danielle Moss Cox. I'm the CEO of Oliver Scholars, a 41-year-old college access, success, and leadership development organization. We identify high potential students who may have been overlooked for admission to independent day and boarding schools, and then support them through college graduation. How did I end up here? I'm not quite sure. Out of college, I had a very brief stint in financial services, and within 9 months, I knew that that was not where I wanted to spend my time. So I took a teaching position in the Bronx, and one thing led to another. So that's
Go for it.
Hi, good afternoon. How y'all doing? Excellent. Nice to see some familiar faces. Doug Bauer, Executive Director of the Clark, Scriven, and Fernley Foundations. The Clark Foundation is the largest of those 3 foundations. It is a 5th-generation family foundation. And we focus on the issue of helping people out of poverty and helping them lead independent and productive lives here in New York City, as expressed through the work of 80 grantee partners in education, employment, and social services. The family is originally from Cooperstown, New York, home of the
Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. Founded by the Clark family, the Baseball Hall of Fame, but also home to many other things as well. And so we do a lot of work in central upstate New York. How I got here, I took the D train and walked over. Okay, it's an old line. Anyway, so like Jhae, I started in corporate communications, actually, and was exposed to philanthropy through the corporation that I was working for at the time. I had done a lot of work in my undergrad years in politics, worked on political campaigns. And what I saw in philanthropy was this marriage of my skills as a communicator and my strong interest in doing work in the community. And then my second real job out of college, still working in corporate communications, I was promoted from within to manage the corporate foundation at the ripe old age of 27, which was, they were crazy and I was crazy enough to do it. And that was kind of where it all started. And 37 years later, here I am. I've been at the Clark Foundation for about 16 years and been teaching at CBS, which has been wonderful since I think 2011.
Thank you. And very quickly, tell me any boards you're currently serving on or have served on.
Start with me?
Yep.
Currently serving on one for-profit board, the Leatherstocking Corporation, which is our for-profit side of our work with the family in Cooperstown, New York. Currently serving on the Trust for America's Health Board. Interesting time to be on that board. And there's one other board I'm serving on. I've been board chair of the Support Center for Nonprofit Management. Also been the board chair of the Better Business Bureau for Wise Giving out of the Better Business Bureau in DC. Past board chair of Philanthropy New York, and the most recent board chair of Partners for Health Foundation, which is a healthcare conversion foundation based in Montclair, New Jersey.
Thank you. Danielle.
So I currently serve as secretary of an organization called Everyday Democracy, something we need right now. And I'm also board chair of the New York Women's Foundation.
Oh,
I formerly served on the Social Justice School in Washington, D.C., and I also sit on the board of Hit the Books.
so much. And I'll just say briefly, I was, my own role, I was an investment banker post-Columbia, moved professionally in nonprofit 33 years ago, have always been focused on youth services. I chaired the board of PACE before being asked to become their executive director and CEO about 15 and a half years ago. And I have been a trustee of Smith College. I chaired the board the past 5 years and have just rolled off of that. And because she's awesome, I have joined Danielle on the board of the New York Women's Foundation, where I currently serve as a board member. Part of the reason I ask is because as we talk about boards, and I think what's really interesting, and along the way we'll probably touch on it, but I am a better CEO for having served on a board. And I'm probably a better board member for being a CEO. And so these roles of leadership and the ways that we are able to impact the world are not isolated from one another. So let's dive into it. Actually, let me ask the audience here. How many of you currently serve on a board of directors? Awesome. How many of you aspire to serve on a board of directors? Better. Amazing. How many have participated in the nonprofit board leadership program here at Columbia? Incredible. 20 years and counting. Awesome. And has anyone participated in the board showcase that Columbia does from time to time? Okay, there's an opportunity for those of you who haven't. So it's a nice time where Columbia works with their students and alums and connects them up to nonprofits that need board members, which are many. And speaking of many nonprofits, Doug, can I ask you to just give us a brief overview of sort of the state of nonprofit world in New York City?
Sure, happy to do that, Allison, thank you. There's about 46,000 nonprofits in the city of New York. That's according to a 2020 study done by the Mark School at the Baruch College, which does a lot of work in public policy and public affairs. 18% of all workers here in New York City work for a nonprofit. 10% of the city's GDP is generated by nonprofits, okay? So a very significant role here in the city. I think it's really important to, and I'd like you to think about this. Think about this city if the following things did not exist. A, Columbia, NYU, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Metropolitan Museum, the Metropolitan Opera, the Food Bank of New York City, City Harvest, 258 charter schools, which to me are the real engine of education, K-12 education reform in the city, 51 settlement houses that do place-based human services work across the 5 boroughs. There's 180 organizations that do college access, process, and success. One of the best is the one that Danielle runs. Think about the work that Jhae does around literacy. If that was all gone, all of that is nonprofit activity. This city would not be New York City if we didn't have the nonprofit sector. And the final thing I would say, because it's a wonderful forecast for this weekend. You take a stroll through Central Park, that's managed by a nonprofit, the Central Park Conservancy, or a stroll through Prospect Park in Brooklyn, also managed by a nonprofit. So the role of the nonprofit sector in this city is deep and broad.
And they all need board members, at least 3 by statute. So there's a lot of roles here. Let's dive in a little bit. Jhae, let me start with you. As you think about, Doug will get to fiduciary roles of board members in a minute, but as you just think about when your board is working really well as a CEO of a nonprofit, what does that feel like? What is that experience?
What I think about when the board is working well is 3 things. They are bringing their time, their talent, and their treasure. Oftentimes when it comes to being a board member, most people enjoy it because it sounds good. It is a second job. It is a volunteer job. You basically pay us to be a part and invest in the work that we're doing. So whether it's 1 to 2 hours a week, whether it's 5 hours a month, understanding what that time commitment is. When I talk about treasure, it's not just about finances. It's also access to your network and other people that you're connected to. It might be the corporation or where you work. And then the treasure is really you as a person, whether it's the expertise that you bring, it's the passion. It is 100% being an ambassador for the organization. It should be one of the first things you talk about. Have I told you about Hit the Books lately? People should be tired of hearing about the organization they're like, yes, we know you're on the board of Hit the Books. When those things are happening, that means meetings are easier for me because my board member is actually doing a handoff. They're inviting me to lunches or dinners or events that they have at their job. So they're actually facilitating the work that I am doing.
Danielle, you've been a ED and CEO of a number of different nonprofits. When it works well, what does it look like?
I think authentic partnership is key. When I feel seen by my board members, and by seen, I mean that they're paying attention to the impact that we're having, the strategies that we're executing, when they're personally invested in seeing our young people thrive and do well. But I think also respecting the expertise of the people who have proximity to the work is really key. Everything that works in a corporation doesn't necessarily work in a nonprofit organization where resources are constrained. Often, I don't know anyone who feels like I have more than enough money to do everything that I want to do in this organization. So we have to be very creative around building infrastructure, taking care of our staff, leveraging partnerships and relationships. You know, one of the benefits to having been around for a few years is being able to call other executive directors who are running organizations that may offer things that we don't provide, whether they're mental health services or food insecurity, because our young people come with their whole selves and their whole lives. And so being able to leverage social capital, I think, is really the engine that drives this sector.
Thank you. And it's a job. There's actually fiduciary legal responsibility. Doug, can you talk a little bit about what you actually are required to do as a board member?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think, three things. I mean, so you are the ultimate fiduciary for the nonprofit, right? So you have to think about that. You're the ultimate fiduciary. You're the financial backstop. So you got to make sure that the I's and T's are dotted and crossed when it comes to the numbers. So that's number one. Number two, your other big job is to hire and or fire the CEO, and of course evaluate the CEO's performance, right? So that's a real essential duty. And I think the third is what Jhae hit upon. You're really an ambassador, right? You're out there representing the organization, opening up your networks. Back in the day, we'd say we'd open up your Rolodex. We don't have Rolodexes anymore. But opening up your networks to the nonprofit that you're representing. So it's really about spreading the word, and obviously fundraising is a key component to that. The other thing, too, is if you bring a specific skill that nonprofit needs. For example, I was talking with one of our grantee partners yesterday who's very focused on finding a marketing/communications professional to join the board to help them with rebranding and repositioning of the organization. And so that's something, you know, so there's folks that are going to be looking for specific skill sets to help flesh out whatever that nonprofit needs to do.
Thank you. I'll also add that nonprofits will have boards that vary, grow, and change with them depending where they are in their life cycle. So if you join a board of someone who is an emerging organization and or a very small organization, the board members may be doing what Doug's alluding to in a more sophisticated way, but a lot of hands-on work. There may be almost quasi-staff roles that the boards take on as volunteers. As the board becomes more sophisticated, I'm guessing the Metropolitan Museum of Art board is not putting labels on envelopes. There are, you know, really very, very different kinds of organizations, and you'll hear people talk about fundraising boards versus other. All of us, speaking for us nonprofit types, are hoping to have some fundraising happen on the board. But it is, there are those, so that's the primary function of the board, and those that have broader implications, depending on what the organization needs at that time in its life cycle and where it is. Jhae, talk a little bit about something that sometimes I think is hard for new members to the nonprofit community, which is to say that our boards tend to have people who don't do what we do. That unlike a corporate board, which often has a lot of expertise about the industry in which that they are representing, talk a little bit about board members and how you educate them and bring them on board, such as it is, so that they can be helpful, but also what differentiates what they know versus what we might know.
So I always say the magic of what we do is in our building. And so as a board member, I think it's incredibly important before you even come to a board meeting, you actually should get connected to the work in some form or fashion. So Hit the Books, we have our own facility, like right up the street, 127th and St. Nicholas. And we want to ensure that before you become a board member, you get to meet our students, because if you're not connected to the work, it makes it a little less real. So you get an opportunity to meet the staff, you get an opportunity to meet our students, maybe you get to jump on the mat and punch a few of our heavy bags, learn a cross or a combo. But I think that it's really important for them to also understand what they are stepping into, what the commitment is, and is this something that they genuinely want to be a part of? I will be completely transparent. I had no idea what I was stepping into on my first board. And I did it simultaneously while being an executive director. And I think to your point, it actually made me not only a better executive director, it helped me to understand how to better onboard a board member, because it's so much more than attending the board meetings. It's so much more than your financial contribution. And one of the things that I know to be true is that as an executive director, I am super duper busy. And if a board member says to me, tell me what you need, I probably almost never reach out because I need so much. I think it's also imperative for it to be a mutual relationship to say, hey, Jhae, I know how to do this, this, this. Is this what you might need, or how can I support in that way?
Amazing. Danielle, talk a little bit about the resources needed to run an organization and where your board can be helpful.
I mean, I think we've talked about it to some extent, right? We need money. I think for us, it's really experiences for our young people. I always like to say you can't aspire to something that you've never heard of. And one of the great opportunities that we have as an organization to really open up our young people and their families to the possibilities of what's out there. And I'll use an example. When we take our kids to a boarding school during the summer, we also have a day bus just for their parents, so that they know where their kids are going to be spending a week, and they have a little exposure themselves before they go through the admissions process. And if you haven't spent time on some of these boarding school campuses, they rival a lot of higher education institutions in terms of resources and expansiveness. You might have a gym solely dedicated to ice hockey, and then another gym solely dedicated to basketball, for example. And every year, parents are on the campus wondering, which building is the school? And just absorbing the fact that everything here is the school, right, is a lot. So I think, mentorship is really important. Helping young people navigate financial aid is really important. Reading their college essays, even in this moment of AI and other things that are affecting things, is really important. And then when they graduate from college, right, how do you decide if you're going to get an MBA or an MFA? What are some of the things that you're considering when you're making those decisions? And so I think there's so much more that people can give that enriches the experience beyond just the dollars. So you really need board members who are in it and really connected. You know, one of the things that I'm really excited about at Oliver is when I first joined the organization, we had a lot of independent school parents of means, and I think that was really valuable. But now a third of our board members are actually alumni of the organization, right? And to see, you know, my trustees who are now in very senior level corporate positions, and someone's a working actress, sorry, just to see examples of the work and have those folks in the room when we're making decisions about the work, I think is really key.
Thank you all. Also, the last panel was talking about K through 12 education, and someone was saying, if you're talking about outcomes, you need to be having a very long horizon. And it's always beautiful to see outcomes sitting in the room with you of extraordinary people that have benefited from your programs. That's
Gotta
really
be able to
that's
sustain
beautiful.
the
This is it.
organization.
This is my
long
evaluation right here.
to see it come full circle.
So let's go to some of the challenges that are currently existing and talk about the current environment, which is stressful, which in many cases, we have an administration that in some cases is deliberately targeting both the folks served by nonprofits, but actually nonprofit status and nonprofit funding directly in some cases. Doug, we faced a lot of crises in this city. I've been through a few with you, actually. Talk about the current environment in New York and how these challenges feel same or different from either past crises, and how you, as in your funder role in this case, are really thinking about that and your support of the nonprofit ecosystem.
Okay, wow, multi-part question.
Take any piece.
Okay, so, and I want to try and do this in as nonpartisan as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So, some context. This city, and it's a remarkable city, we've been through our share of crises. 9/11, 2008 financial crisis, 2009, Superstorm Sandy, the pandemic. In every instance when we've had a situation that has threatened this city and the citizens of this city in whatever shape or form, the nonprofit sector has always been part of the solution. We're trying to ameliorate what has occurred, okay? And it's done that in partnership with government and the private sector. And that's been demonstrated time and time again, not only in these crises that I just cited, but pretty much on an ongoing basis. And Allison is absolutely right. We're in a very, this is not a natural disaster. This is not a terroristic threat. The federal government is not interested in partnering with large parts of the nonprofit sector. That's just the reality. It's painful, it's deeply troubling, it is upsetting 250 years of the way that we have operated society in this country, and it has turned everything upside down. So that's a very different operating environment than what we've had in the near term and historically. And so it has put enormous stress on nonprofits, their staffs, the leadership, their boards. This is a very, very different operating environment. As I said earlier, I've been in this field for 30 plus years. I don't know how you all are feeling, but the last 9 to 10 months have been some of the most interesting months, but also some of the most deeply troubling months I have ever experienced in my career. And I want to tell you right now, these three folks and their colleagues are heroes for navigating what has happened, not only in this city, but across the country as it relates to how things are going on. So we're in a very, very interesting environment. As far as how funders are thinking about this, I think, number one, private funders are making sure that they take care of their grantee partners. I think a lot of them have shifted to making sure that they're providing things like unrestricted support, dollars that Danielle and Jhae and Allison can use as however they need to use them in order to, propel the work that they do on a daily basis and meet their mission. So we don't do program or targeted support, unrestricted support, very, very important. I'm happy to say Clark has always been an unrestricted support provider, has been for years. We try to do as much of it as we can in a multi-year format. So I think funders are trying to take care of their grantee partners. You know, normally we look to government to be a partner, all right? Locally, to the extent that state is involved, we're certainly trying to look for partnerships, and to the extent that feds are involved, we try to do that too. You know, it's been a struggle at the city level because the political leadership has been in some turmoil at City Hall. I'll just leave that where it is. You know, there's some other things going on at the state and federal level. So that's been troubling, that we can't have kind of normal conversations about how are we going to sustain work in these various issue areas: education, human services, workforce development, whatever it may be, the arts. So those kind of normal conversations aren't taking place. That's an issue. So, and the final thing is I think the funding community is trying to figure out ways where we can collaborate and do pooled funding. That's been an ongoing conversation. There are things in the pipeline that I think have some promise. I think in particular in the food security space, there is some interesting work going on because the USDA has pulled back a lot of the support for food security, and that's already had an impact this calendar year. So there's things like that we're looking at. But I would say the funders are trying to be as supportive and as flexible as they can to make sure that the dollars they're providing are the most meaningful dollars and can be used with as much flexibility as possible.
Thank you. Danielle, tell me if you have any examples of how your board has hopefully supported you, but how they're helping in this time of crisis, and what their role, if it's shifted, how it's shifted.
Yeah, so I think one of the most meaningful things that came out of my board was people asking how I'm doing. Now, that may seem small, but I have been doing this work in an executive level role since 2002. And I was there for Hurricane Sandy, and I was there for the 9/11, and I was there for all of it. And no one has ever asked me, how are you doing, right? And it's my job to put on a brave face every day so that my staff isn't panicking. I think that's been really meaningful, just supporting me as a leader in this role and understanding, you know, that there has been a retrenchment in funding. So I'm delighted to hear your strategy, but you know, this year we had our annual gala, and it was a struggle to find anyone who wanted to be honored because we have historically supported Black and Latinx communities. People said, you know, we love the work you do, but I don't want to be the face of anything DEI. So that was really, I think I might have taken a mental health day because that was a real wake-up call for me. I think, you know, initially we said we would just soldier through business as usual, but this is not business as usual. And I think, you know, no one's waiting to be saved. And when I say that, I mean communities are not waiting for folks from, you know, who don't live in their neighborhoods, for example, to swoop down and come and tell them what they need, how they need it, what needs to happen. I'll use this example. A family friend's niece was visiting her for the summer. She lives in the South. And she kept talking about her play grandma. And so I finally said to her, tell me who your play grandma is. This was a retired woman on her street who invited all the kids after school to come have a snack, to come and do their homework together, and that they didn't leave her yard before their parents came home. I said, my God, that's an after-school program, right? So it's just an example, like people are trying to meet their immediate needs. And I think for us who do direct service, we can talk about the macro of what's happening, I'm thinking about my actual students whose names I know, whose parents I speak to on the phone. And so it puts a face to some of the challenges, and it makes it more heartbreaking, right? When people who were already struggling, right, to kind of make ends meet, to keep a roof over their heads, to access mental health services. You know, one of the things that we've learned during my time at Oliver is that Medicaid doesn't transfer out of state. So it's great, you got this scholarship in Massachusetts, and suddenly you have no coverage because you're not in the locality where you started, and helping families to kind of like navigate real things. So this is a really hard period.
Jhae, any examples of how your board has helped support you in this time?
I think that they have given me the space really to do what needs to be done for our students. I think they have also allowed me the opportunity to educate them on things that may not be issues that they face on a day-to-day basis, or there is no impact to them in their lives. And I think that that has allowed me to really leverage the work that we're doing, because you can be disconnected from it as a board member if you're only engaging in the board meetings, because the things that we're dealing with in direct service happen every single day.
Beautifully said, thank you. I'm going to lift up something, Danielle, you didn't say directly, but I think it's a time where having really frank conversations about the risk profile and the comfort with risk of where organizations are, and that's something the CEO and the exec and the board need to be having conversations about. Do you choose to move ahead with what might be a controversial honoree? Do we think about where are we in terms of our comfort level collectively, and some of that also gets into realism in terms of how you're funded, but where are we comfortable stretching the boundaries, or maybe we didn't see boundaries there before, and how do we think about that? And particularly when our missions are often focused very directly on populations that are being demonized.
We're definitely working with pro bono counsel, shout out to the Lawyers Alliance, to help us think about privacy policies, right? What information are we collecting about the families that we serve that maybe don't directly impact the experience of students, but could open them up to some harm if they were accessed. We're also thinking about our mission, quite frankly. That if you go to our website, it says, you know, we are specifically focused on Black and Latinx students. There's a reason, obviously, behind that. Black and Latinx students are the least likely to have access to gifted education programs. In fact, they're 37% less likely to be identified for gifted education, even when their test scores are identical to white and Asian students. And the number one reason is teacher bias, right? So, you know, the idea that something that was created to kind of give students a little helping hand who have the chops to do work at that level is really concerning. But, you know, do we change the mission statement? How do we communicate that to our alumni who are going to have very strong feelings that could impact their giving? You know, I think we're in a moment where people we are the ones that we've been waiting for. Let me say that. Like, everybody's waiting for someone else to stand courageously on the side of our values. And no Messiah is emerging because we're it. The people in this room even are it. And so, you know, this is definitely a time of deep partnership. You know, one of the things we talk about at the New York Women's Foundation is power with and not power over, right? When I come together with my board, I am absolutely the expert on everything related to Oliver Scholars, including the finances, right? Which I'm managing on a day-to-day basis. So I think traditional hierarchical models of leadership, of of board service have really begun to shift a little bit, not completely. How do you support an organization when you don't really know the community, right? And I want you to do more than just visit the program once. I want you to really understand the issues, the systemic and structural issues that make our organization necessary in the first place. And then hopefully you'll take some of that learning into your corporate experience, right? So come with an eye to learn. I had this conversation with one of my alumni trustees. I respect Columbia Business School. I did the executive leadership program for nonprofit execs. Going to business school does not make you the expert in everything. I know it sounds crazy for me to say, right? There's always something for us to learn. And so come ready to learn and dive in.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We're open up to Q&A, just 1 minute, but we're going to go rapid fire down here. You've just talked about, basically, it's all hands on deck. So we need all of you involved here. Give one piece of advice as people consider their first board experience that you had that said, this allowed me to do something different from my day job in a volunteer capacity that was important. What's one piece of advice you'd have for a student or an alum or a faculty member or any of the other communities that are represented here of what could make them an awesome board member? Jhae?
I think I said it. Offer what you have rather than waiting to be asked.
Yeah.
Come to learn and connect.
Doug?
I think it's an opportunity to stretch yourself in a way that you won't be stretched in a corporate setting or in a for-profit setting. And I think that's the opportunity. American Express many years ago used to have a board leadership development program. And they specifically built it because they saw, their HR executives and senior executives at Amex saw that there were certain skills that were developed in their emerging leadership, in their management core, that Amex was shaping. But there were other skills that they saw that were lacking in what they were developing within Amex. And so they built this nonprofit board leadership opportunity and started to place emerging managers in nonprofits to flesh out their skill set. And it was a very successful program. They measured it was very effective and created a much more well-rounded manager. And so I think, nonprofits help you be a little bit more expansive. Your aperture is a little wider about how things work in society. And I think that's really important. The other thing, and students in my current course have heard me say this, Peter Drucker talks about the box. Everybody has a box, and in that box are three things: your personal life, your professional life, and your public life. What are you going to do with those three things? What's going to be the mix, right? I've been very fortunate to mix my public life and my professional life into a job. That's one choice. You may want to stay in the for-profit sector, and that's great, but I hope that you will think very thoughtfully about how you want to utilize the public part of your life. And nonprofit board experience is, I think, a really important and essential way to help you figure out what you want that public life to be. The one other thing I want to just say real quick, Allison, right now, I think one thing boards have to, and Danielle, you touched on this, but boards really have to, in partnership with leadership of nonprofits, have to do risk planning and scenario planning. Mm-hmm. You have to think about what ifs in a very, very deep way. You always do that, but I mean, it's especially profound right now, given the political context. And boards that are not doing that kind of work are putting their nonprofit in peril.
Very much. Questions? I see one here. I think there are microphones.
Hi, I have two questions. One is board diversity. So it's not like a for-profit company, and it tends to be for nonprofits anyway. You need capital, and tends to be, capital commitment tends to be required for the most part. But how do you ensure, is that sort of baked into your board selection, or how do you refresh the board so that, you constantly sort of evolve with changing of the environment? So that's one. And then the second is, we just came out of an education panel, and we talked about, technologies that could scale. And so in terms of impact that could scale, why do you think that there's not enough sort of merger M&A in nonprofit, so that, if a program is 1 or 2 million, operational cost,
Yeah.
and if you're under the umbrella of, let's say, Clark, I don't know how big the foundation is, but why wouldn't it be like that, so that there could be more scalability in impact?
So 2 questions first. Board diversity, and I'm hearing you broadly defined, economic as well as other sorts of factors, whomever.
So for the first question, there has to be a commitment on the part of the organization. I'm grateful for the board members that I have that can make a higher level contribution, but we also have educators in our board. We also have actors on our board, right? We live in a multi-dimensional world, and we run multi-dimensional organizations, and we should want multi-dimensional thinking as we're kind of like charting out a course. For the second question, I've heard that a lot, and it's certainly even come up for us because there are a few other organizations that do similar work. I recently had the opportunity to go to Tatiana's at Lincoln Center. It was a very unique culinary experience. Sometimes I take my kids to McDonald's, right? And there's a McDonald's every 10 to 20 blocks. So I'm not sure why we think that everything can and should be scaled, right? Because some work happens at a very local level through relationship. This is the driving force of this sector is social capital. It's one thing to be able to make a great product. It's another thing to get people to change their worldview, their perspective, and their behavior, right? And I remember having this conversation with a board member, like, I know you can't get your kids to do certain things, right? This is hard work to open up a world that people haven't had exposure to and get them to buy into that in such a way that they're willing to make changes in their personal lives. It's like the mother in Washington Heights who only wants her kid to go to City College because she can walk there, right? As opposed to going to Yale, right? And her mother has no cultural context for what that means because she is an immigrant. And so Yale means something to the people in this room, but it doesn't necessarily have any social bearing for other people. But developing a trusting relationship with a family to get them to go against their instincts, that is the magic of this sector. So I hope to go back to Tatiana's, but I'm not gonna, my kids will still probably want chicken nuggets sometimes. So.
We have time for one more. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Just on the merger acquisition, it's a good question, and it's an evergreen question. Let me just say very quick, a major construct that we have used for over 100 years is that, if we want to have something scaled up for societal impact in this country, philanthropy will fund the work through a nonprofit. It'll be measured and evaluated. We'll determine that it's great. And then we turn to government to really scale anything up, right? To really have societal impact. There's never enough private dollars to really scale at the level that government can. Well, guess what? That construct in the last 10 months has been completely blown out of the water, right? So what are we going to do? right? And that question has not been yet answered by the field or by the philanthropic sector. So that remains to be seen. Mergers are very hard to do in the nonprofit sector. There's not a golden parachute for the CEO of a nonprofit who's merged into another one, right? There's not a stock price to settle on. So there's dynamics within nonprofit merger and acquisition activity that takes longer. There are different incentives. I will say Sea Change Capital Partners, which is a grantee partner of ours, does have a New York Mergers and Acquisitions Fund. That money is there for that activity to take place. I will just say, I think we're going to see more of that activity in the coming months because of the way that government funding streams are going to change. And it's, the federal money that flows to city and state, some of that is already dried up. More of it's going to dry up. We'll see how the city and state responds after the elections. So it's a very, very fluid environment, and that very fluid environment could trigger more merger and acquisition activity than we've seen in years past in the sector.
Or just people going out of business.
Or going out of business.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the panelists a chance to say the one thing they walked in here wishing they could say that they haven't said yet. But first, I want to say what I've heard so far and see if this resonates. We've talked a lot about leadership in different roles. There's a CEO, an executive role, and or board role. Those are different things. They have different lanes, but when they work best, they're working in partnership. One that hasn't said it as quite specifically, but if you come onto the Partnership for After School Education Board, it's going to go best if you really care about other people's kids. And so thinking about the mission of the organization and what matters to you and what's really important to you is going to have that go well. Loved the discussion that talked about nonprofits as part of the solution in almost every aspect of major crises, how that's being challenged today. Fiduciary responsibilities, ambassadorial roles, fundraising, these are real. We need all of it. It doesn't connect if those things don't happen. A real discussion in the current environment about risk and risk tolerance, but also understanding and making sure that you're preparing for potentially down the road uh-ohs. And I love what's come up in a couple of different ways is that the ongoing learning and education of a board member. So part of being a nonprofit board member is entering a world that's not yours and figuring out how you learn about that and the joy of that and the curiosity that you can bring to that, but also that there are things that we don't know. Nonprofits don't have executive teams, many of us, I don't, have an executive team of 15 people. I count on my board members to ask me hard questions, to challenge my thinking on something, and to support me when necessary, because the rest of the team is going to look to me to be that leader, and that's really hard if nobody's every now and then just saying, I've got your back too. That really matters. Yeah. So quick, rapid round. Doug, starting with you, what did you wish you could have said that you haven't mentioned just yet?
So look, please get involved. That's what I would say. And the Nonprofit Board Leadership Program that Allison runs is a great way to get if you've not been involved. I know a lot of B school students have had some kind of volunteer philanthropic experience, but the program that Allison runs is a great opportunity to really see this firsthand in New York City, and you get to work with terrific people, and you will learn something, and you'll make a great contribution to what they're trying to do with the missions of their organizations.
The other Allison, keep going. Danielle.
I said this on our call. I think that the nonprofit sector is the greatest expression of democracy in our society. The boardroom is actually one of the few places where I've seen people from Park Avenue in a room with people on 125th Street, right? And so we've got to protect this because this is where the learning, the dialogue, and the collective problem solving happen.
I think what I would say is something that I always say to my parents when they join our organization. I don't refer to us as a family, I refer to us as a community, because community will take care of you even if we're not friends.
Beautiful. Thank you to the panelists. What a rich conversation. Appreciate you all, and I'm just honored to be in the community that you all represent and thank you all.